of it. The 1962 Sino-Indian War, for the first 30 or 40 years, nobody talked about it. When you ask somebody, you say, no, this experience is too traumatic. You just said, and you just don't want to talk about it. And when some Chinese, when I speak to, acknowledge it, they will say, well, it's too traumatic. I wouldn't like to talk about it. It's just recently that the people are starting to come up to speak on it. And the association of, I'm sorry, my memory is bad with these with acronyms. Association of Indian Chinese Deoli 1962 group, headed by Eva is the representative of the association, has started in Toronto to speak on behalf of the internees. Actually, I should say the club is for the detainees and friends, because a lot of them, like Eva and Shen, was never interned. I mean, they weren't even born. I don't think they were born. Okay, so they weren't even born there. So it is, if you want to join a club, Eva will give you the information. So 1962 Sino-Indian incident. I myself have trouble speaking about it until recently. When I look at the brief conflict between China and India, a statement of October 24, 1962 from the Chinese government stands out. The Sino-Indian boundary question is a question left over by history. This presentation will not try to figure out this question left over by history. We will concentrate on what happened to the ethnic Chinese living in India at the time of the conflict. As Hakka Chinese was a majority of the ethnic Chinese living in India, our stories will be about the Hakka in India. The war broke out officially on October 20th, 1962, on two fronts in the Himalayas. The Northeast Frontier Agency, better known as NEFA, in the northeast of India, and AIDCI in the northwest. Within a day, the Chinese army took over the Indian positions on both fronts. Within a month, the Chinese advanced well into the disputed territories. The Indian government reacted swiftly, very swiftly, by declaring China as an enemy nation and, by extension, the ethnic Chinese living in India as enemy aliens. They stripped the enemy aliens of their Indian citizenship. There were a lot of Chinese who were third or fourth generation, they were already Indian citizens, so they were stripped of the citizenship, of the Indian citizenship. And on top of that, they passed a lot of laws and regulations to restrict the personal or the civil liberties of these ethnic Chinese. The law stated that the ethnic Chinese, the enemy aliens, cannot leave the boundary of the city. So if they live in Calcutta, they cross over the Hooghly River to Howrah, they may get arrested. And the publication divisions of the Ministries of the Information and Broadcasting and of External Affairs, Government of India, circulated various reports and information booklets to inform the public about the war. These reports and booklets portrayed the Chinese as an aggressive, slippery, and unprincipled people, cynically indifferent to any standards of international behavior and quite unconcerned by the inconsistencies in what they say. In other words, they are liars, the enemy aliens, that is. According to some of the new laws and regulations, the persons of Chinese descent were required to report to Indian authorities for registration and classification. Under the same enemy alien law, the Chinese cannot travel out of their the jurisdiction, and also they were forbidden to take any government jobs. So even government jobs like working in the dock as carpenters, because at that time they were so, Hakka is the main port. So a lot of the Chinese carpenters in those working in the docks, the international port, they lost their jobs. The Indian government closed down Chinese clubs, Chinese language schools, and Chinese language newspapers. My brother worked for Yintu it's the Chinese Journal of India, where the printing press and editorial office located in Macau Street, just behind Banting Street. Any of you been to Calcutta know the Banting Street. The trams, the noise, the dust, everything. So when a newspaper closed, those who work there has to report to the police station twice a day. Because amongst the enemy aliens, they have different classification. Some enemy aliens, like I was a kid, we are okay. We are enemy aliens, but we are okay. You know, no threat to the state security. But my brother, because he works for the Yintu was regarded as dangerous enemy aliens. So he had to report to the police station twice a day. Because there were quite a number of enemy aliens in Calcutta, that's where the largest population of the ethnic Chinese were. He's usually, I suspect that they know everybody, they just line up and have a party there if they could, if they weren't that worried. So there they were, and then I'd come home quickly for lunch and then rush back to the police station. I think the weekends the police station sort of allowed them to stay home. I'm not sure. The Indian government published nationalistic rhetoric that sought to unite the Indian nationals against the enemy. Rhetoric showing teachers going to the front as nurses for the brave Jawan, that's Indian soldiers. And rhetoric of children in schools giving up their lunch money to buy equipment for the soldiers fighting the Chinese invaders. In response to the call to defend India against the enemy, many mainstream Indians harassed and discriminated against the Chinese. Often these harassment and discrimination led to violence. Chinese were dragged onto the streets and beaten. Properties belonging to the Chinese were vandalized and destroyed. The Indian nationals boycott businesses owned by the Chinese, such as the carpentry and shoe shops, as well as the tannery, restaurants, and beauty salons. This is not to say that there weren't any defenders. There were also Indian nationals who defended their Chinese neighbors. I quote from one of my interviewers. One day, a group of students came to the street where many Chinese had their shops. They came to this shoe shop owned by Hakka. The students shouted anti-Chinese slogans and wanted to drag the Hakka to the street to beat him up. The Indian who owned the shop next door came out and shouted at the students, "Hey, these people were born here in India. They are not from China. They are one of us. They speak better Indian Kharsi than you and better manners than a lot of you. Our children play together, go to school together. You leave them alone and go home." The police came and the students left. Generally, mainstream Indians' attitude towards the ethnic Chinese in India could be summed up by a quote from the Lok Sabha debate on 1940-1962. Lok Sabha is the lower house of parliament in Delhi. Quote, "Even if he," the Chinese, "becomes a citizen of India, if his parents or grandparents belonging to a country which is at war with me, I have no faith in such a person." Many Chinese lost their jobs due to this distrust. Before the border conflict, Chinese carpenters were well respected. They worked in the docks along the Hooghly River, furniture shops and factories owned by Indians. Most of them lost their jobs. Many Chinese were served quit India orders. When some of these Chinese could not raise enough travel money to leave India, they were arrested and jailed. The forced deportation continued to occur to late 1967, 5 years after the conflict. Many more Chinese were jailed without formal charges. The Indian government also carried out large-scale internment of the Chinese living in India. This is the internment to the internment camp called Deoli, the infamous Deoli. The soldiers evacuated the Chinese from all the towns and hill stations on the foothills of the Himalayas, towns like Shillong, Darjeeling, and Kalimpong, and from cities like Hakka, Bombay, and Delhi. These evacuated Chinese were put into jails, and in Markham, the Chinese were confined in cowsheds. I guess they ran out of jails. The Indian soldiers even went to boarding schools in the Himalayas and gathered all the Chinese students. Beginning on November 1962, the Indian soldiers started to round up the Chinese. Here's an account of one of my interviewees, 9-year-old Ming. Ming's parents worked in the catering business in Digboy. Digboy is the oil town of the Himalayas, the highest oil field as far as I know. They sent the 5 children to schools in Shillong. Ming's sister and 3 brothers went to boarding schools. Ming stayed with a Hakka family in Shillong while she attended an English language school as a day student. This is a quote from her. The soldiers told us that they were there to evacuate us. They told us that they would protect us, and they told us not to bring too much stuff. We'll be back in no time, they said. They lied. I was only 9 years old. I didn't know what was happening. I think I just grabbed some clothes. I didn't know I would end up in Deoli for 4 years. The soldiers loaded us on a bus, dropped us at the local jail and locked us in. We stayed there for what seemed like months, but I think it was only for 2 weeks, maybe 3. The jail got very crowded. All the Chinese from Shillong were put into this jail. I think there were some from the neighboring towns too, but mostly from Shillong. After what seemed like months, we were all taken to a railway station, and we were told we had to get on the train and that we would be all taken to Rajasthan. Later, we found that the Chinese from other northern towns like Darjeeling and Markham were evacuated to local jails in their areas. The jails were like holding centers, I suppose. Some Chinese from Calcutta were evacuated to the Calcutta jails. We heard. We waited there until the government got all the Chinese they wanted evacuated. The Indian Army then transferred us to Deoli concentration camp. The soldiers took all the Chinese from the jail to a train station near Shillong. The train, with over 2,000 Chinese, started on a 7-day journey to Deoli. We got herded onto the train according to where we were evacuated.